What's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm
You
great.
recovered
Hey, you
yet? You
realize
recovered?
I look almost. I'm exhausted. I was just
Yeah.
listen. I've never been to Falcon Days before, and tried to do all the things.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a mess.
It's a mess. And then you have all these friends want to go out to eat. And here's the thing: sadness, cries here for me. I did not get one bite of Cuban food while I was there.
Didn't she didn't go over to the senior meal over at the Crispells?
She did.
They got Cuban
I
food.
did not. I got here's how that works. They go to the Chris Bells and get Cuban food. I got to eat at the cafeteria with the dean of students, who's a kid I've known since he was growing up. Our parents went to school together, and he was a freshman when I was a sophomore. That's why I call him a kid still. And great guy, but cafeteria food. Parents got cafeteria food.
Were
They're
you?
recruiting the wrong people. Can I say that? I'm the one writing the check, buddy. Let's
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah. I think there's um, at some point I'll probably list out for our dear FC some of the things I wish that Falcon Days would change from a check writing standpoint. Like, yes, the kids need to want to go there, and I get all of that. But having toured and been courted by other schools, you got to court the parents' pocketbook because they're a big part of that arrangement. In some cases, no. Um,
Yeah, and even if it's she's got all the scholarships in the world, it's still my FAFSA that's going to set all that in order, right? So hey,
yeah.
I'm just saying. I did
How's
have some good Italian food while I was there, but
yeah.
I mean, I got to eat at Outback. That wasn't
That's
bad.
true. That's true.
Yep.
You know. By the way, this is Do the Work. This is not just food/Florida College talk. We're
We
going to be
always
talking
talk
about.
about food, though.
Yeah, food is our subset. It's like our subtweet in all contexts. But our kids are going through the cycle of college selection again.
How many
I
times can I
think
get my new sticker on the screen today? That's going to be the question.
enough to annoy me that I'll be upset that I didn't go to the bookstore and get my own. Chris Emerson drops the hi kids, sup kids comments. I think he might enjoy our conversation today. We
I don't
will
know. Maybe he
probably,
won't.
maybe he
Hey,
won't.
by the way, next week is D-Day. That's
I know. Boom, boom, boom. That's coming up.
Emerson and Robertson coming to the
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we'll have surprise guests show up. I don't think so, but maybe we will. You never know. Anything's
I don't know.
possible. We can keep adding people in.
I'm going to take Mark Roberts and see if he's here, and you and I'll just eat popcorn.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think they want to have that conversation because um,
I
Mark
want to see
Roberts
it.
might be
I want to see it.
the alpha of the. Yeah, start prepping Monday. I don't believe that.
Hey,
I
that's
think of
too
rep
soon.
Tuesday
You need to
morning.
prep it. Prep Tuesday morning at 9:58. That's when you prep because that's what you're arguing for.
Yeah, yeah. Really, he needs to just make sure that his staff preps for him, and they've got a good stack of coffee ready in the wings. If they do
And
that,
I thought this was Emerson. I thought the Spirit was going to lead him in that discussion.
yeah. Who knows? Who knows how this plays out? Challenge accepted. He's ready to go. Let me just go ahead and make sure that we acknowledge that in perpetuity for the broadcast. He's ready to go. By the way, I want to say a couple of quick things before we get back to our main topic at hand. Chris, I really appreciate your willingness to jump in on this. And I also
Do not
think
poor
it's
Chris. Wait a minute.
hilarious.
Time out. Jeff O'Rear. Chris emailed us and asked for this. Chris proposed this idea. Let's get this out there. We did not approach Chris. Chris approached us, just to be clear. So we're just doing what Chris wants here.
Yeah. Terry had to interrupt, but I was just trying to soften Chris up for the eventual bus that's going to drive over him next week. That's all.
Here's the most ironic thing about that is Chris emails us and it's like, hey, we should have this discussion on people who don't plan like me with people who plan like y'all. But we can't plan that for 6 weeks.
Yeah. There's some irony there. There's some good irony there. Let me lay out something for our broadcast today, like what we're going to talk about. There's a couple layers to it. Some are super obvious and some aren't. If you're from my generations, Terry's generations, you probably know the probably like one of the first commercial memes that folks probably connected with. It's the shoes. It's Michael Jordan. It's the Air Jordans.
You got the graphic. Throw the graphic up there.
That's too many steps. I don't want to do that right now. I'm concentrating. We can have it up there in a minute when I'm not talking and you're distracting. But there's a parallel to that because Jordan's actual feelings about that advertising shtick and program were entirely opposites of what they branded out there. But we're going to talk about the preacher and his wardrobe a little bit, both directly, maybe some indirect application of it, how that's changed over the generational kind of space, and thinking through it. And I'm actually going from the mindset of John to today, like going back in the biblical context as well, because in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, the attire of everybody comes into play. And I want to take it from a standpoint of, and I want to exclude this, and I'll probably just censor it and say, no, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about modesty. Like, that's not our subject today. Like, hemlines. We're not talking about hemlines. That's not our subject.
Not discussing the length of your shorts today.
Yeah, especially Chris Emerson. I don't care if you want to wear bloomers on the golf course, Chris. It's not going to help your game. It's just not. Perfect the backswing, learn the judge distance, select the right club. Those are the fundamentals of golf in a nutshell. So at least that's what Gamester taught me.
By the way, don't you think that he would look great in those knickers like Payne Stewart?
Oh, those are awesome.
I think Emerson 100%. Needs to wear some of those. What are those called? They're like called 7s or 9s. Those knickers. He needs to wear those in an Argyle sweater next week for our discussion. That would be fantastic.
The next time they do one of those preacher scrambles, I expect him to upscale his attire to the classic standard.
The GPGA. We expect pictures of you in knickers next year. There, Chris Emerson.
Yeah.
You and Britt Moody. You and Britt Moody need to knicker it up for the GPGA. I want pictures of that and matching Argyle sweaters.
Mark Roberts does that already because
why Mark does that? Because he makes plans and he knew what to do. Chris just goes in his closet in the morning and picks the shorts that the Spirit picks out for him. Anyway,
so here's some things to think about as we begin this discussion. Over the years, when it comes to the concept of some of these areas, many congregations, if not most congregations of believers of any persuasion, have all had expectations of what those who are speaking are going to be wearing. Like, it's just totally, pretty plain that in a lot of places, particularly in more, I'll say, fundamental or, aggregate look at things, a shirt and tie is the base model for younger guys. Shirt, tie, sport coat would be the next thing. And you say, why is this a thing for preachers? Like, what is this about the work of an evangelist? Well, part of the evangelist's role is to serve as a communicator that both represents the message, but also, on the other hand, is accessible enough to the audience that the audience that's listening is going to get a open door to look into it, to consider it, to really kind of say, I'll listen to that guy. It's why, some congregations actually have communal or group standards. Like, this is what we expect. Looking back at it, here's my part of my illustration for this. You think about John. John's key identity was wrapped around his outside the normal, otherworldly look. Jesus, in some ways, serves as the expected contrast to that because he looks kind of more expected, but doesn't speak in expected ways. Where John doesn't look at all like what they would expect a religious leader in their culture to behave and dress like. And so that contrast highlights the similarity and the differences between their work and their message. Here's the thing. On a communication level, it's one of the things that as human beings we're designed to learn both audibly and visually that help us retain or connect to a message. Like for lack of better, rationale, understand that it actually matters. Like it's a thing that actually has an impact. And yes, Terry probably has key opinions as to what the best shoes are. He's much more of a shoe guy than I am, although I will admit to recently putting on the literally most comfortable pair of dress shoes I've ever owned.
I've rubbed off on you because you're even sending me pictures and asking for advice at this point.
Hey, look, I have a long history of saying if someone's good at something, why not take advantage of their expertise? If I wanted to know about preacher golf, I'd probably talk to Chris Everson. But
there's better golf preachers than Chris. It's okay.
Chris brands himself. I'd probably talk to Gamester again. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
I'd probably go talk to a great Gamester and talk to a pro.
Hey, let me ask you this: when you started preaching, did you do an internship? I can't remember. You did a couple, didn't you?
Well, I did an internship of a kind in St. Croix, and the standards in St. Croix aren't the standards for everywhere else. And so I didn't do a formal, well planned out internship. That's partially because of availability, partially because of my schedule. And then doing what I did in St. Croix was primarily a chance to get me some personal work experience. And so it was a different kind of thing.
Okay. So when I did one internship for a summer at Riverside Drive in Nashville with Wilson Adams. One of the requirements of that internship when I started out was to wear a tie to the office every day. So the way my preaching started out was the dress code was a tie to the office every day. And that was the dress code for Wednesday night. Probably you wore a tie on Wednesday night most of the times. Maybe you still do. And Sunday morning was always suit and tie. In fact, back then, I don't know about you, but the whole khaki sport coat thing was kind of frowned upon because that was viewed a little too casual for some places because you needed to be in a suit and tie. Now, that was admittedly 25 years ago. Okay, a little over 25 years ago. Right at 25. So that's my background, Phil. We set the stage of where we are today. Bow ties, never, right? Long neckties. And of course, we went through that phase you did too, where it was the tie shirt combination, all solid, they all matched, right? We all had to have like 14 different colored dress shirts. Although I was the rebel, I would wear any colored dress shirt as long as it was white. And later on, expanded my horizons. But just to kind of start off there, tie to the office, like not even just a tie on Wednesday night, tie to the office every day.
I want to key into some Edwin says in a moment. Edwin, I got your comment. We'll pay attention to it in a moment. I think there's some value there. But I also want to drive this point home too, especially for younger preachers. Years ago, I was in a program that Johnny Edwards and his family were doing. And it exposed me to kind of a larger spectrum of when people begin the work of preaching and their interest in it. And to some degree, we had some individuals who were still in high school. They're like, this is what I want to do. I know it's what I do. So you have these teens that are just, crossed over the age boundary. And then you also had some in 60s and 70-year-olds. And in those studies, you can kind of see their demographic showing up every day to those classes, 2 weeks straight classes. But they actually did a half-hour package on the preacher and his hygiene. And so they talked about hey, look, you need to make sure that your grooming standard is up to snuff. And they literally joked in an intentional way, nobody likes a stinking preacher. And so, like, literally make sure that you're, using deodorant, taking showers. And I'll be fair, it was a surprise to me because I wouldn't have been allowed out of the house without engaging in proper hygiene as a child. Like, we didn't have many rules, but that was one of the things that really was a rule. But I got to college, and in the dorms, at FC in particular, I realized that wasn't necessarily a standard for everybody else.
We had a guy had to force as a dorm monitor to take a shower while we were there together.
I'm aware. I am aware.
Let's not forget the single greatest the single greatest applause at our spring banquet that year was the video clip of him getting a haircut.
Yeah. So for most of the folks who are probably joining in this conversation from are a little bit older preachers, and maybe you've sorted that part out. But the next step of things we thought about today is to learn to be intentional with it, and that's where Edwin's comment comes into play. And John's dress had a purpose in it. It was unique to his case. There were biblical allusions and connections that were tied together with it. Certainly, some of it had to do with a concept of his commitment to Jehovah, to Elohim, etc. So certainly, there's some of that. But my perspective to that is learn, as the evangelist, that you do actually set the tone for a conversation in that choice model. And it's not just making sure that your clothes fit, that they are, sized appropriately to you. And by the way, look, that's a thing actually that matters. And you can do it in a reasonable way. Like if your name is David Dan and you are a generic size human, you can get some great deals at Goodwill. He used to be able to do that all the time. I have never had success with finding things in my ginormous size range, like tall, at Goodwill. But there's some great options there that you can take them, get them cleaned, and then get them altered to fit you properly. And you can get $1,500 suits sometimes for $50, which he was successful at doing. But understand that, like it does matter. And for me, going back historically, I cycled from not owning any kind of suitable dress clothes to never wearing jeans to assemblies whatsoever. Bill Turner, thank you very much for pushing me in that direction. And then generally kind of going that way for a long time. And I'm not really a jeans guy anyway. Like I just don't wear them. It's not my thing. To suit and tie Sundays, sport coat and tie Wednesdays, to now ties fit the context. And so some Sundays, depending on what I'm wearing, I'll have a tie on. Wednesday nights typically don't, because it matches the needs of our congregation. Some Sunday mornings, our congregation's dynamic has shifted quite a bit. Sometimes I'm wearing a tie, sometimes I'm not. Overseas, doesn't happen. Like I don't wear it overseas at all. It doesn't fit the context when I go out of the country.
Well, I want to get to what Chris said, because I think that ties into what you just said, and I'll explain what I do now. But about the two Edward Jones guys, one wears a suit and tie and for his client list, and one doesn't. He wears a golf shirt. I think that's based on your client list. I mean, at the end of the day, if the guy in the golf shirt knew he was meeting with a client that thought that it would only be good if he wore a suit and tie, he'd put on a suit and tie for that guy. And because it's part of understanding your clientele. And I think that's really dictated to a degree where I'm at on dress. Look, originally we were just taught, and I think the first 10 years of preaching, you're probably like me, Phil, that you were just ingrained. You had to wear a suit and tie, had to, and nothing less than probably a tie on Wednesday night. And if you didn't wear a tie, it better be a really good looking pair of pants and a shirt. Like it better be. And in the winter, you put a sweater on there because this is important,
Yeah.
But then in Memphis, the East Shelby congregation was a different kind of congregation when it came to dress. And for me, I had to, in order to set the things right in that congregation to fit the tone, it was suit and tie, it was nice shoes, it was bow ties a lot of times. I mean, it's not unusual in Memphis to have 20 guys in bow ties out of a church of close to 300. That's just part of seersucker and those kind of things, which, by the way, would be out of place other places. But in Memphis, it fit. There's a golf tournament in Memphis every summer. There's a seersucker Sunday that's in support of St. Jude. It's tied to the golf course. So it's one of those deals where that changed. I moved to Alabama. I brought some of that with me. Doesn't fit as much all the time. Different congregation.
No, there's a big shift there in the communal culture there.
And I mean, I got to tell you, there's one day I'm sitting down with the elders, and the elders say, "We don't want you to wear a tie every Sunday." And I'm like, wait a minute, what? We don't want to wear a tie every Sunday. But at the same time, I know there's some people that want me to wear a tie every Sunday. So you'll see me mix it up if you watch our live stream. I almost always, by the way, have a sport coat. In fact, the token sport coat is right over there hanging on the bookshelf.
Emergency sport coat.
Well, it's pretty much the only sport coat. I mean, unless I wear something that completely. But it's not uncommon for me to have a plaid shirt on, khakis, sport coat, right? That's just where I'm at today. I know Edwin in the past has preached with a tie on and not a jacket. And I
calling him out like that.
No, I just had Ralph Walker preaches without a jacket all the time, and it's always a pink tie. Like, there's guys, you know what they do, right? I mean, just you know who they are. Look, Stoneheart's never going to wear anything but jeans. If you have Keith Stoneheart preaching for you, but just be prepared. And I tell you what's funny is Stoneheart came to Memphis and wore a pair of jeans, not even a tie. Everybody thought that was great. Dude, if I'd have showed up the next Sunday in a pair of jeans and no tie.
Yeah, Paul Hams, is this the Fashion Tips episode? For some of us, probably it is.
Probably so. But again, no, Paul, we're talking about how it changed. So over time, those things change. I mean, one of my interns is watching, won't tell you which one, and he sent me a private message saying, I'll never forget on one of my surveys, we had the members review every sermon, 5 of them at a time, anonymous. Somebody criticized him for a plaid tie because it didn't match in his outfit. That's how much it mattered in Memphis. And here, it doesn't matter as much. So all that to say what Chris Emerson is saying is there's a culture within your congregation.
Yeah.
When I go preach at West Palm Beach, where Brent Kirchville is, if Brent is dressed up, that's a tie. He never wears a coat. It's somewhat out of place to go down there and wear cufflinks and a coat. It just is out of place. It doesn't fit their culture. And you got to know that.
There's a connection that Chris brings up that I think is really important, is the work of the evangelist is in that intermediary space between people-focused and God-focused. And when I go back to looking at John and thinking about Edwin's great comment, it's about making sure an intentional choice that what you are doing both aids in the process of connecting people to God, but doesn't get in the way. And some of us, like myself, like Terry, most preachers actually probably fall in this bucket, have very strong personalities, strong senses of who they think they are, or at least present publicly in that way, even if internally they're not. And we also tend to do things that create the presumption of this is his thing. Like for me, what's Philip's thing? Garden and tacos. Like, okay, what's Terry's thing? Sports,
sports and shoes and crazy socks.
Yeah, shoes, crazy socks. And so you expect that. Deviation from that expectation can also disconnect people from the message. Hey, wait a minute, he's not doing his thing. So once you kind of aware about, and Paul talked, it's personal branding. It really is.
Yeah.
There's some great books on communication that talk about it. Stand Like Lincoln has a whole section on iconic, is it Speak Like Lincoln? I don't know. It'll come back to me. I might tag it in the post.
Speak Like Lincoln, Stand Like Churchill, I believe.
That's it. I'll probably tag it later. But there's a whole section on it. Again, your role is part of the communication process. So what about God in that space? Well, in the New Testament, as well in the Old, God calls all men in all places, in all situations, to him. The expectation then is that they will be transformed in that communication, in that conversation. So again, you're still in that middle space where you're not trying to be in the way. You are not fully a representative of God. You are drawing their eyes, their hearts, their minds in that direction. So they're going to come how they are, and they will probably, in time, assimilate and change the congregational culture on the basis of their behavior and actions. which is one of the barriers to evangelism, by the way, because we don't want people who aren't like us around us because it's uncomfortable. Well, they use bright colors in their clothes, or that person always wears a red tie, or whatever. It makes us nervous and anxious that it's different than us. I think there is actual value then of being intentional in the process and learning from all of those components.
I think look, by the way, links up in the Facebook post, and it's speak like Churchill, stand like Lincoln. So we were both wrong. Emerson brings up a good point that part of this is generational, and that I got to tell you, that's a struggle. I don't know if you feel that struggle though, Phil, but I know I do. I've got a younger generation that would prefer me not to wear a tie, and maybe not even wear a coat. They would find that more comforting. I got an older generation that wants to see me in a 3-piece suit still, and they find anything less than that to be not being reverent to God. And I agree, Chris. I don't think God judges us by our dress as much as our heart, and especially in the area of reverence. And I think you can be respectful and honor God in a polo and khakis or a 3-piece suit, or, by the way, even in shorts and a t-shirt. Truthfully, it's about your heart. And I think that's an important thing there. And as Edwin points out, all of culture is different. Look, I got friends when I was in Memphis. We had friends that worked at FedEx who met regularly with vice presidents and presidents. They didn't wear ties. They had the emergency sport coat, and they'd wear golf shirts sometime, and just throw on a sport coat with it to go meet with the vice president. That's more representative of the culture we live in. The days of your copy repair guy wearing the Xerox suit that they all wore the same suit, those are over. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for that.
Yeah. There are still communities that live that way and work that way. It's changed in a lot of those places too. Barbados used to have a much stronger culture in that area where you are going to work, you're going out in public, you're going to put on a collared shirt, especially in public spaces away from the beaches. A very traditional community in that regard. It's changed. It's softened in some of those areas to be a little less formal, like Edwin was pointing out. Knowing that should motivate a couple of things of change. And this kind of addresses some of this stuff. And how I do know of that, either that story or a similar story where a person's attire, was driving these things. But here's something to think about. At the leadership level, the leadership has to, and I say leadership, elders, deacons, mature Christians, evangelists, Bible class teachers. You need to make a decision corporately and say what matters most to us. Is it imposing our preference as to how we dress, or sharing the message with as many people as we possibly can to see them transformed to become like Jesus? And asking the hard question, what am I willing to do? At what point do I become so uncomfortable with this change because I feel like it's so different than where I am that I won't do it? And then realizing that your boundary may not be the same boundary that God has laid. It might be too far. It might be too loose. And saying, constantly reassess what seems like a small thing and make it part of the thing. Like it really is more impactful for many, older and younger, than it may be for any of us who are talking about it right now.
Yeah, and I think it's Jeremy's thing about modesty and clothes speak to others. I agree with that. But again, we're kind of saying here that you got to fit the culture a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so let's say that I take the idea that no matter what, suit and tie is what I need to wear to reflect the proper reverence for God. Is that reverence just on Sunday morning, or do I add that to Wednesday night? Where do I draw those lines? Why are those lines different if that's what proper reverence is? And I tell you why the line has always been different, even when people thought you always had to wear a tie. It was because that's not what the culture did on Wednesday night. And if that's not what the culture did on Wednesday night, you dressed somewhat effectively to fit the culture. And so it's important to realize if you go into a congregation that nobody wears a suit and tie and you show up in a suit and tie all the time, I'm not sure that's modest either.
Yeah. Well, it's on the technical application of the term, not how we use modesty, because when people say modest today, and this is not how Jeremy uses it, so I'm not going to ban his comment. Like he didn't hear the introduction. He might have heard that. I don't know. We use modesty to mean don't expose a specific segment of flesh.
Correct.
The Bible is not using it in that sense when it appears in the New Testament. And I think it's super important for us to be aware of that. It doesn't mean that the flesh should be exposed, but that's not how the text is used and how we should be discussing these things for the larger advantage of the gospel. And Chris brings up a good point for preachers too. Don't just copy something because it was successful in the entire space of another guy. And look, everybody does that. We do it intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes that sermon style or that delivery method, or I loved how they put their visual media together. Look, if that's not your methodology and you don't communicate well using visual media right now, don't just jump on it and say, okay, I've got to use 4 charts, or I'll use this illustration. I love visual media, but visual media may not connect to every single message. And you need to tone it down at times to really kind of make sure that what you want to say is what's said. Same thing happens with our attire too.
What's funny is the greatest example of that is our buddy Mike Richardson. And, Mike trained with Ken Welliver back in the day and Ken spoke. And Mike always tells the stories Ken Welliver will get up and he'll be preaching and he'll stop and say amen. And people will say amen back.
Yeah.
And Mike did that one time. Yeah, he stopped and said amen. And he's like, it was crickets.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything. He's like, and I found out at that point, I know Ken Welliver. It's just you can't just do something because somebody else can. And that applies in a lot of ways. It's one of my favorite stories Mike told me one time.
And look, this is a key point. I think Chris and Edwin keyed on to something in their side comments to each other. In the end, some of these choices are made simply because we want it this way.
Yep. And I think one of the things that is frustrating, by the way, is not to be honest enough to say, and this is what I will tell you, why do I have so many pairs of dress shoes? And why do I have bow ties? And why do I wear them sometimes?
I know.
You know why? Because I like them.
Yeah.
Because I like them. And there's times where I'll wear a bow tie and a certain pair of shoes because I want to. What is frustrating, though, is if I turn around and say that everybody has to dress that way and try to wrangle some verses to force everybody to match a dress code that I want to do. And that's where the problem comes in, as if you're not reverent or spiritual enough to, I'm going to refrain and be nice. Look, never mind. So, but at the end of the day, what we don't need to do is and this is the hard part. This is the hard part for everything. It's hard to not force our standards and really not even standards, but wants on other people as standards. We want to take the things we like to do and we want to make other people do it because we want them to feel less spiritual if we don't. I'll use Edwin as this example in a completely different area. Edwin has for a long time. Years ago when we first met, we don't homeschool. My wife's a public school teacher. And Edwin one time was trying to bait me. And he said, do you homeschool? Or no, he said, ask me why I homeschool. And I was like, fine, I'll take the bait. Why do you homeschool? And he's like, because I want to. And that was as simple as it was. I want to. That's what we want to do for our family. And you don't have to do that. I'm not going to make that some spiritual standard. And that's how this is too. I mean, it's because I want to. Chris, I will not be wearing a bow tie November 21st. That's my plan. That could change though. I could wake up the next morning and decide that I want to. It's what I want to do. I have a plan, Chris, by the way, and you'll find this out next week about what I'm going to preach. Because if I preached what I want to, it would not be a full meal for our members. But that's just a glimpse into the future.
Yeah. Don't open up the package too soon. You got to wait till Christmas morning, Terry. Christmas morning.
Christmas morning.
Yeah. Wait for the Advent. So, look, there's also, and Paul's joking around, there's a mom who ingrained the preference for a bow tie in her kid. So there's all that stuff. Here's some things to kind of last thoughts about this. My encouragement is to be intentional and be audience minded, but don't do it at the sacrifice of yourself. Like we pointed out, there are some guys who simply would not ever be expected to do that. And it's okay. It's totally fine to have that variation in it, because it's a reflection of the community of Christians you're part of. And that's the final kind of consideration there, because we're not talking here about the true expectation of God in the text, in the sense of he has a specific standard, as he did for some of the Levites and some of the priests at some of the time. They had regulations and they had expectations as to what they were to wear in worship. When it comes to our physical attire, we're applying principles. The same principles apply whether we're in the pulpit or not in the pulpit. And I'll add one more component to this. I will suggest to you that the principles that apply in the pulpit, not in the pulpit, are the same principles that apply in our day-to-day life. We make judgments on those as to what we wear in all those other spaces too. If I'm going to go to a big meeting about a big subject, you better believe I will take a little extra time figuring out what I'm going to wear, because I know it makes a powerful impact. It does change the audience and the way that they respond to things. And as much as the culture will always say, this matters, that matters, everything else, you're swimming through that as a light for Jesus. And so you're trying to figure out, how can I be a good light? How can I be an encourager? How can I direct people as they should be?
By the way, I just want to tell Edwin Crozier the reason he doesn't wear a bow tie is because he's not man enough to know how to tie one. But beyond that, that's my response to it. It's a girl. Let me say this, what Paul said earlier about being yourself. I think that you do need to be allowed to be yourself within the context of what is appropriate. And I'll illustrate that this way. I mean, look, I wear an orange tie last Sunday. Everybody knows why I wore orange tie on Sunday. Tennessee hung 62 on Missouri. I wore an orange tie because when I play Alabama, I'm going to wear a black tie because we're going to lose. Okay. But
that's a safe statement.
Yeah. One of our elders' wives is an Alabama fan, and she's wearing houndstooth and red on Sunday. She's doing the same thing. You're allowing your personality and who you are to show through. That's fine. Do that. Don't just let this stifle who you are to the point that it changes your personality. And I think that's the key. See, Paul Hammonds is just like me. And by the way, Chris talks about meeting approach. I'll just tell you, I will take stuff, and on Sunday I'll wear a sport coat and tie, but Wednesday night, I probably won't even have a tie on. I'll just have a sport coat on with no tie. It's going to be different during the week. Yeah. I'm going to do the same things I normally do all the time. Just to your point you just ended, in a meeting, I'm going to dress like I do all the time. It's not going to always be the same.
For me, if I was to go to an in-person meeting, and some of the ones I've done recently, a little bit of reading the room, but most likely if it's a midweek thing, Monday through Friday, and I already know the context of the group, it's going to be sport coat, no tie. I think it's the right choice for right now at most of the places I've been recently. Sunday, it's probably going to follow pretty similar to Krista's approach. I'll probably still, at this point, would end up trying to default to no tie or more casual ties. I've got a lot of the old shiny ties that were much more upscale look. I'm just not into it as much as I once was.
Phil, do you think, and I know this happened for me, do you think the COVID parking lot for you and I that we were in so long, do you think that might have also changed some of this for us? I mean, I know it impacted me. I know it impacted me. I know that there's more likelihood because of that than in the winter. It may not even be a tie. It may just be one of those 3/4 zipper sweaters with a tie on and not a coat. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think one of the things we learned in the parking lot for us was that it was more about fellowship and not about how we were dressed. Now, not everybody got that memo, but most of us did. And I think that changed going forward, at least my approach.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think I charted a little list of this was the last day I wore a tie. This was the next time I wore a tie, and that was in a gospel meeting because it was the right choice to encourage some of the saints. And then I wore a tie eventually again as we returned inside. And it definitely had an impact. And now I am much more flexible in that area, where it was a point where I could tell you that for probably 15 to 20 years, I had worn a tie every Wednesday night and in every teaching opportunity because I expected that of myself. And it was also part of a planned intent for the church at Jerry Wilson Road that all the leaders would always come wearing a tie and usually wear a coat, because we were trying to coax the younger members to what we would consider a lesser standard. Like, we wanted them to wear a collared shirt and maybe a tie when they were on the Lord's Supper table. And that was where we wanted them to be. So we were drawing the audience in a direction.
By the way, we didn't even talk about the fact that, when I was interviewing for a job one time, I had hair that was spiked and the goatee that I have. And I was told that if I moved there, I might be asked to change my hairstyle and shave my face. I mean, and that was a real conversation, right? I moved there and they didn't ask me to do that. And it's kind of a funny story we all share. But even things like that have changed over time, Phil. There was a time where the facial hair that you and I wear all the time basically was not appreciated in the pulpit by people. Mm-hmm. And there's still some carryovers in the older generation that don't appreciate it, by the way.
I've had facial hair of some kind or another since I left the home, for the most part. And so that's just been part of it. And over the years, folks have commented on it positively and negatively, and it's just been one of those things. It's fine. That's about it for our time slot here. I really appreciate it. I want to also comment, we had a fellow jump in, Brian, jump in and join us as a new commenter. Good to see you there.
Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate your comments, particularly joining in. And we do that kind of thing. There's encouragement to it. As we pointed out at the beginning, I want to kind of reiterate. The goal here is to be part of the process to encouragement, the process to connecting people from where they are to see God more clearly. Once we accept that and we include things like, this is a choice I'm making. I'm doing it this way because I like it. We're doing it this way because we have goals. We're doing this communally as a church together because we have goals. People can buy in. They can participate. And I want to add one component to this. Something that often gets lost in assemblies of Christians together is joy, rejoicing, and abject fun. We said, well, we can't have fun in worship. I mean, you absolutely can.
You do not have fun at church. Never.
No, I think I will suggest to you that there isn't a component of the structure of our application of decent and orderly that maybe we haven't hit the mark as strongly as we should. I just want to encourage folks to rethink and to re-engage spiritually in that process and grow their faith. And maybe it'll help grow their congregations. Maybe it'll help grow the members. There's some good outcomes that could happen. Terry, last thoughts?
Well, it's decently and orderly. It's not decently and lifeless. And I think that's one of the hard balances we have there. And final thought is just, hey, look, on all this, as Phil said, reflect your culture, but also honor God, find the balance in that. Just make sure whatever you do does not become an obstacle for people to be able to worship. And that's the thing we didn't really talk as much about. Look, there's times that I would prefer not to wear the coat I wear, but I know if I don't, that's an obstacle for people. Find your balance, reflect your culture, get buy-in, be respectful, not only to God, but to everybody in what you do. And like everything else we talk about, make sure your decisions pursue peace instead of self. And that's a key there. Just pursue peace.
All right, guys, have a great day. Thank you for your participation. Looking forward to dropping the bomb on this non-planning nonsense next Tuesday.
You say we're planning to do that?
Yeah, we planned.
We planned.
We continue to plan. We actually have an after-action plan. We actually include some funeral speeches for.
We have plans for these boys.
Yes. But everyone take care. Have a great day. If we can help you